they know the game really, really well. So they have really difficult questions to ask and difficult feedback to share. So it's like one part of the challenge is to acknowledge that players understand the game better.
Games and Names podcast.
Hey there! Don't forget to comment, subscribe, and share this episode. It's really important for us. And now, to the episode itself.
Hello, my name is Stan. I'm VP of Product at AppMagic. I'm your co-host here at Games and Names podcast, a podcast where we talk about games and the people who make them. This podcast is brought to you in the partnership with AppMagic, an analytical service for analyzing mobile markets and gaining actionable insights. Today, we're talking about one of the most crucial things for mobile games, especially nowadays. We're talking about LiveOps. How to work with it, how to run it, how to operate a successful game in 2K24. And of course, I'm not alone. Today joining me is Vikas, ex-executive producer from Zynga, who has been working in the company for, just think about it, for almost 12 years, working with different games, with different products, and helping them to grow, prosper, and be really, really profitable. So, Vikas, glad to have you tonight in our virtual studio.
Hey Stan, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here as well. And thanks for the introduction. I've completed close to 12 years, and I left Zynga last October. So I've been enjoying the break since then. But you mentioned about the kind of games and the products that I have helped. So in my last role, I was the executive producer on CSR2 Racing, which is one of the most popular and fascinating racing games on mobile. And I also before CSR2, I was the executive producer on Farmville Country Escape, which is slightly more casual in terms of its genre. So I have a bit of experience across casual and racing midcore.
So, Vikas, you just mentioned it. You had a very vast experience working with different types of games. So you worked with browser games, you worked with casual games, you worked with racing games, and these all are different genres, even different platforms sometimes. But as far as I understand, for all of these games, you were working with LiveOps. You were running the LiveOps, you were making the operational part of the game. So, how do you say, what is, based on your experience, what part was the most exciting for you or the most challenging, especially comparing browser games to casual and to racing?
It's a very interesting question. So the most challenging and actually along with the challenging, it's also one of the most interesting parts of the role is understanding players really well. So
Right.
so when you are working on a game that's at a certain life cycle, then the game has also evolved. And you have players of all kinds of maturity. So you have players who are fresh into the game, going through that early play journey, and then you have players who are slightly more seasoned, and players who are like really hardcore, and they have like powered through the levels and having an elder player experience. So when you try connecting the dots, you're kind of delivering joy to players via games to all kinds of players. And it's really difficult to craft features and craft those experiences, because like players are diverse and it is challenging. I remember the like what we have done a couple of times at Zynga is that we have had various phone calls and sessions, feedback sections from players directly. So we have had conference calls with them, and like it's like just taking myself out of the equation and just looking at it from an outsider's perspective. Like it was so fascinating to see that the players know the game so well, right? Like I think many of the players know the game much better, like in and out, versus the teams that's developing. And that happens because teams do see a lot of changes over the player over the development life cycle, but some of the players play on till for years and years, and they know the game really really well. So they have really difficult questions to ask and difficult feedback to share. So it's like one part of the challenge is to acknowledge that players understand the game better, but the second part of the challenge is to solve the problem for them and to give them more reasons to continue playing.
Wow, that's a really great answer. And I've never thought about it this way. So yeah, I've seen that players, especially really motivated and engaged in the game, they make all these Reddit forums, they make all these wikis, they are really deep inside of it. But the thought that for games, especially that are running 5 years, 7 years, maybe even 10 years, sometimes the team can change throughout these periods several times, and there are players out there who were playing this game all these periods, so they know it better from the inside out, and they've seen all the changes better than the new developers who came to the game, the new game designers, the new managers. So it's a really good thought, and I've never thought about it, and it's really challenging as you've put it.
And just to add on to that, Stan, like I feel that it helps. Like it helps that the team sees changes as well. Like, and this is something that I have realized only recently, is like one part of the exercise is to launch the game. You launch the game, and you're really passionate about creating those experiences, say before launch. But once the game is launched, like I feel that like the game is no longer yours. The game is defined by the player, right? And then you need a new kind of mindset. You need a mindset of serving the player. So it like that mindset change is also important for the team, and you need, like, more than anything, to have the team that's managing the game to be representative of the players who are playing the game as well. So you need players who are hardcore. I mean, you need team members who are really hardcore on the game, and you need team members who are relatively new, so that you can actually get the best of what players are also seeing in the game, right? And bring that kind of synergy in. So it's natural, and it actually helps game development a lot better.
Yeah, makes sense. So balancing between the experience of new players and how they experience the game, and hardcore players who are really deeply engaged in it and already know all the inside outs, and they are on absolutely different level of experience from the beginners and newbies. Let's take a step back for a moment and try to, in general, understand why we are discussing LiveOps today, except for the fact that you've got a pretty vast experience in this sphere and it's really captivating. But in general, I'd say that right now LiveOps is more important than ever. So launching a new game is only half, even if not less, of success. Operating it successfully for years, that is the real challenge. And the question is how you do it right. What are the main approaches and pitfalls, and how to plan your live ops, especially when you haven't launched the game yet? Which is even more interesting. So recently at AppMagic, we've made a big research on the casual market. And what we found out is that only 0.6% of all games, among casual games, of course, they become successful. So it's really challenging to launch new games. And we had guys from Supercell, from Triple Dot, from Voodoo in our podcast, and all of them were saying, that right now it is really difficult to launch a new successful game. So it is even more important to have a very successful, good performing, and good operating already launched game. And that brings us to LiveOps. And I'd say that it will be pretty fair to suggest that most of the companies on the market, if they want to be successful, they're going from launching games, from trying to find the next big hit, to operating and maintaining the game. Based on that, let us try to understand what is defined as LiveOps, first of all. So, from your experience, how would you call it? What is LiveOps?
It's a $1 million question, and I think different teams, and this is my realization. And I think different teams define live ops in different ways. Maybe it's also possible that different companies define live ops in different ways. I remember I was in a room, and there's a meeting that's happening, and we were discussing about in this case CSR2 and live operations, and this is one of the first meetings that I attended, and for me this was a relatively new a set of people that I was meeting with, and we were talking about live ops in such an intense way. And I remember in Country Escape, we never spoke about live operations as being so complex and players being so hardcore, right? Where in CSR2 it was the case. And I was the dumb person in the room who kind of raised the question around, hey, like how does this team define live ops right now, right? And I remember that the VP of the game, he broke it down into real simple terms, right? And I think that that really helped define live ops to me in a very simple way, which is we are serving players who have a very good reason to come back to the game or launch the game, and there's a reason they launch the game, and there's a purpose that they need to meet, and our job is, like, the live operations team is mandate is just to make sure that they're able to do what they want to do. Like, players are able to come in, launch the game, have a clean experience, have a lot of fun, and if they have built connections, engage with the connections they have made, and that they have something exciting to look forward to, right? And that's it. And in pure simple terms, that's the purpose of live operations. You just need to make sure that you have a very clean, healthy, performing game, that you have something exciting for players to always look forward to, which means that there's content, there are events that are planned, a calendar of events, and obviously you have all of these notifications that are set up that will bring players back. In many games now, you have a crew system, a co-op system, where you can actually build a deep, meaningful relationship with like, I'm calling them strangers, but like they could be very close friends over a period of time, and that's exciting. So that, in a nutshell, is live operations. Running that entire system and framework really well is live operations. So it's while it sounds very easy, it's definitely not. It's hardcore, but yeah, that's why it's also a lot of fun.
Funny enough, you've mentioned the LiveOps calendar, running the events, and understanding how it goes, because recently we've launched at AppMagic a new tool called LiveOps and Updates Calendar. And basically what we do, we have a dedicated team who analyzes the market and all the top performing games in each and every niche. So like 170 games right now, like a big bunch of games, and all of them are analyzed. So we've got the events calendar, we know what is going on, we have the descriptions, the tags, the screenshots, and you can see the connection between the running the events and the exact revenue and downloads data. So basically it really helps to analyze how your competitors run the live ops events or top performing games, right? Run the live ops, and what are the best performing events in your niche. So that is really helpful, and that what really helps with the competitor analysis. And I'm sure we will get deeper into it. But right now, I'm pretty sure that during your experience, like during this period of those years, the approach to live ops changed as well. So probably back in the day, it was more of we've got a game and it's running, surprisingly for us, for years, and we have something to do because players return and they've seen all the content, they've seen all the levels. What can we introduce additionally to it? Whether right now, I think some of the especially experienced teams, they think about live ops already when they launch the game, so they know, all right, so at this moment this is the initial shell of the game, but then in the upcoming 6 months we will introduce A, B, C, then we will introduce features and events D. So it's not just about the moment of the launch, it's also the planning of the live ops right here and there, because it's clear from the situation on the market that you have to think about it in order to be successful, not just for 1 year, for 2 years, but for years to come. So, say from your experience, how has live ops and approach to live ops changed in the industry?
It's evolved quite a bit, and the interesting piece is it's still evolving, and I suspect it will, like, we'll see a lot more changes in the next few years as well, with the advent of AI and the tools that AI allows. But like, I remember the time when, like, my first game was Mafia Wars. So if for you, like, if you have not played the game, and for your listeners, like, Mafia Wars was like one of the first games on Facebook that went viral, right? So and that was fun, like, and I joined the team when it was definitely during a declining phase. The game was no longer at the scale it was, and at that point, like, I don't think we defined it as live operations. You hit the nail on the head. It was, we have a bunch of players who are very engaged, right? And for some reason they haven't left the game, right? They're still engaging with the game, and they like, to continue playing. They like, to play with their own crews. So let's try to maximize, right? So at that point of time, for us it was a lot about, fixing bugs. For us it was a lot about releasing content, right? We knew that players would love new cities, so we released new cities on Mafia Wars regularly. And it was about, like, to be honest, running a lot of sales that would help meet our revenue targets, right? So that, like, in a nutshell, was live operations then. And obviously thinking has evolved a lot more, and if you look at how the industry has also evolved, like, you will be able to figure it out. Like, right now there is a lot more focus on maximizing LTV for of players, right? And you want to make sure that you're getting maximum returns from your players. So now live operations is a really good tool to make sure that you are having a much more deeper connect and a much more deeper relationship with players over their lifetime, and therefore that ensures that you not only get a high LTV out of them, but also you have them within your network, right? So now your live operations, like, has evolved to a stage where it needs to be a machine. Like, I feel it needs to be a machine. It needs to be a factory. So your live operations unit of sorts needs to be set up as a factory where, like, you are continuously assessing, reviewing what players are thinking, what players want, and figuring out where to take them on their journey, and delivering that, right? And that's where the interesting piece is, because you don't know where players would want to go. It's like, you are guessing that players would like to be on that journey with you, but you might lose out a few players. You might get a few new players, right? So your factory needs to be set up in a way to make sure that you are releasing something and then you're assessing, right? Like, you're reviewing, hey, did it work, did it not work? And then you go back to the drawing board, and then, like, if it worked, then you obviously double down on it, and if it didn't work, then you learn something new, right? You figure out that this wasn't a good experience for your player. So that, like in very simplistic terms, like, is where I think live ops is right now, where the focus of the live operations team is to make sure that, like, players are, like, you are having a very deeper connect with players over their lifetime, and you need to maintain that over, like, I think, the from what I've just understood is like, a lot of new games, they're launched with the purpose of serving players for at least 10 years, right? And if it's a
Yeah.
decade long relationship, then obviously you don't want to cut corners, and you want to make sure that there is trust across both sides, right? So building that deep relationship is important. Now your live operations team is in charge of making sure that that connection, that relationship exists and thrives.
You've just mentioned a very important thing. So, as I see it, right now, one of the main challenges when launching a good game with a good live ops is to thinking not just about the things that are important in the moment, but for the future as well. So, how do I build this relationship with the players? How do I bring content? How do I bring event? How I entertain them for a dozen years to come? What is the end game, the great plan of the game in order to be successful? And that is very understandable. So I think especially big companies like Supercell, that is one of the reasons they have their titles for years in soft launch, because they want to be sure that there is a big connection with them and the players, and they understand how to improve and maintain this game for a lot of years. From your experience, once again, how do you think, what are the main other pitfalls and challenges of running a good live ops, especially nowadays? So for any company out there, what kind of advice can you give? What are the trickiest parts or the things that you should consider in advance?
Excuse me. So I think I covered it briefly earlier. I think one part of the challenges is that you need a mindset shift. Like your entire mindset needs to shift, because still you haven't soft launched or maybe even like global launch. Like you feel that the game is yours, and you have a very very good idea of what's the best way to define that experience for players, and that's true. Like, and it's also a very, like, I think it's definitely a very very hard part of the journey, like launching a game and creating a game. But once it's done, once it's out in the market, then I feel that the game is no longer yours, and players have a very good, like, not a very good, but like a very healthy weightage of that ownership right now. And then the role shifts from that ownership mindset for a game developer to being that kind of a service mindset. Like like giving the best experience for players and listening to feedback and iterating and incrementing and taking players along that journey. Like that is a mindset shift that doesn't really work out for a lot of game development teams. Like in some cases, what happens is you either need to have a much larger team that's set up, because like in the case of Supercell, like you have really small teams running
Oh,
very
yeah.
successful games for like close to decades now. But obviously, like they are also, from what I've read about, trying to increase the size of their live operations team. Um, so you need a mindset shift. You need a different way. You need different ways of thinking for cracking live ops. So that's one. The second is, like, when you are launching the game itself, you need to have live ops embedded in your design thinking in some ways. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of games take a lot of time in soft launch to make sure that their beta metrics or whatever it is that they're testing works out well. And it's also important that, like, there is depth in that live operations framework. At the end of the day, like, if you want your games to be profitable, then you need to understand that you will be delivering events and assets, content assets to players for a long period of time, right? So you want to maximize the value of those assets that are delivered to players. So that means that, like in the case of the CSR2, players love cars, right? So it was easy for us
Apparently, yeah.
to I mean, I won't say easy, but it, like, at least we knew that players love cars, and like we could give cars to players in the way that that they would be continuously engaged for a long period of time, right? So there would be a way for players to get those cars, either through, say, a gacha mechanic or via IAP, like, and maybe after 2 months, 3 months, like, it would be available in a much lesser valuable gacha, right? So you would be able to leverage that asset for a long period of time, and that's possible, like in the context of CSR2, because there is depth in that live operations framework, and that allows for it, right? In some games, you might not have the same level of depth, and therefore you will need to be a little bit more creative with respect to how you can make sure that the game is profitable over a long period of time, right? So it's not easy, but like it needs to be part of your design thinking at the get-go, and obviously you need to test and measure and, like, iterate along all of this through your soft launch phase.
Let's get a little bit deeper in the part about the key strategies and things that you have to use when running a successful live op. So apparently Zynga is one of the most famous mobile companies out there, especially in social gaming, running a giant portfolio. So I'm really wondering, what is the Zynga approach to keeping its games profitable and engaging over the years, especially as you have worked with a big plethora of games? What are the things that came and they were universal for any team that you've joined? So some approach that was for any genre, for any niche, things that you think that can be used and should be used by any developer out there based on your experience in Zynga. Or maybe vice versa, these were the things that not just you brought to the table, but also it is considered as standard in the Zynga as a company, and you should do it this way. So I'm really interested in how it goes.
I don't know the right answer for that. I can just share from my experience of what I've seen happening at Zynga. And you're right. Like I think Zynga is is a master at running live operations for games. Like I would definitely put it in the top two, three uh, successful companies in the world of running live operations right now. And that's because like I think what's been associated with Zynga for a long period of time is its affinity towards data and a lot of data driven decision making. And I think over the last 10 12 years I've just seen that uh, that focus going a lot more, right? Like the entire organization has kind of doubled down on that, and there's a lot more focus on data, and there's a lot more insights that come out of data. Uh, so you really know what clicks behind the vast audiences that play the game, either being in say soft launch or once the game has launched, right? So that data obviously helps generate a lot of insights, which leads to a lot of effective decisions that get made. Um, so that framework is very helpful. So I think this is like and like maybe you don't need me to come and like say that data is important. Data is obviously important, but like it's definitely successful. One of the biggest success stories to come out of Zynga, right? I think just ensuring that um, data is a gold mine. I think what has also evolved in Zynga is the how closer these game developers are to players in some senses. Like I think the initial part of my career at Zynga, I think it was a lot more focused on data, but now I see that there's a healthy balance between data and like let's understand exactly what players are talking about and generating insights from them. So obviously there are a lot of teams uh, that speak to players and interact with players and we have in Zynga there was a team called Consumer Insights which regularly ran focus groups and tests and like gave them builds and would generate a lot of insights on what's working, what's not working. Like I mentioned, we had a lot of conference calls with players directly. I remember one of my good friends at Zynga used to get inbound calls from players as well. Right? This was during the period of Mafia Wars, when he missed a certain window for a sale and he would want it to open again, right?
Oh
So,
wow.
so yeah, 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 all kinds of stories. So over the last several years, there is a good balance between data and player insights coming in. Um, I think the third thing that Zynga does really, really well is it's like I mentioned, it's a machine, right? And the entire company is a machine because you just such a wide portfolio of games and you have just so many teams, so you have all of these experiments that are being run across different games and teams and and you get results of those experiments. So if something is working, then you obviously want to replicate that in other games across your portfolio, and if something is not working, then you know that it's not working and therefore you'd want to not replicate that in your game, or at least in the same way, right? So you have this continuous learning that's set up across a portfolio of games and like every and there's a lot of collaboration, and don't get me wrong, like I think it's like now that I'm out of Zynga, I just like I'm astounded by the amount of collaboration that existed across all the central teams, where there would be a bunch of readouts and knowledge sharing that would happen like regularly every 2 weeks, every month, right? And you could just reach out to anyone and ask about, hey, what's working, what's not working. And these are not just about games that are within the portfolio. These will also be games that are doing well outside in the market, right? So treasure trove of knowledge in some ways.
I'm wondering, so working with games as a executive producer running the live ops is a really interesting role because you don't launch the game, you haven't been there from the beginning, you haven't made all the changes, you haven't built the architecture, you haven't built the gameplay. So basically at some point you come and you have to take an already, I don't know, built house, let us call it, and understand how it will be evolving in the future. So it sounds really challenging because part of the picture is, as you've said it, you might be less experienced with the game, especially compared to the players who've been there for years and years. Another one is that, especially for the first half a year, you don't really know what is the main thing in the game right now, and you have to make changes or to make choices of how the game will run. So how do you balance it? How do you work with it?
I mean, that's going back to the example that I gave, which is like, imagine this is a factory, all right, and now you need to set up the factory in a way that you are able to run tests, run experiments, and figure out what's working and what's not working, and continuously like iterate. And now you need to build a team that is going to work in that factory in some ways. Like, so for me, I look at live operations as like, it's like, it's definitely challenging, but like, it you'll find success by not having, say, one hit or one feature that does well. Like, you need to have it in embedded in your team. You need to have the thought process embedded in your team, and therefore you need to set up your team for success, right? Where more often than not, like, it's a difficult industry. You will actually see a lot of failures more than successes, right? So you need to set it up in a way that you launch something, you look at the data, you speak to players, you figure out what's working, what's not working, and then you go back to the drawing board, and then you take another bet, right? So you have actually become wiser because one of the hypotheses didn't work out, but like, there is something else that you want to try. So that's the part of the journey that I think I would want to highlight, where it's important to, like, the team that launched the game, they had a vision, but obviously, like, once the launch is done, then you need to iterate on that vision, and now you need to set your team up for success in a way that they can continuously learn every incrementally. Every, like, for us, it was every 2 weeks, every 4 weeks, we're just going to get back together and see what's working, what's not working. And we would obviously get a lot of insights from every release and every event that went out for players. Would also get almost daily insights from players on what's happening with them, and what they're liking, what they're not liking. And that factory, again, forgive me for using that word.
Yeah, that's totally fine. So it's more about the process and the established framework
Yeah.
that helps to, if needed, to interchange the people inside. So
Yeah.
even if the person will be changed, you still will be sure that the result will be there, all the process will be built, and the car or whatever in the end of this product line will be launched.
Yeah.
Taking from here, let us try to imagine a small experiment. So
Yeah.
say, and this is an experiment, Yes and I, my co-host, we love to run here at Games and Names. Say we are a game company. Or
Okay.
we could say we decided to launch a game company, you took a break, and then you suddenly understood that, yeah, it's time to go full solo or with me in duo and run a company. So we want to be sure our next game will be a successful hit, not just in the moment, during scaling or during the first soft launch or tests, but for the years to come. So how should we tackle this task? What do's and don'ts should we have in mind? Well, first of all, apparently, what is the best moment to start thinking about LiveOps and how to get it running when we are thinking about launching a game?
Wow. Okay. So let me take a crack at it, right? Like, I think, I mean, launching the game is definitely very, very hard, right? And figuring out what kind of players you want to, like, target, what kind of game you want to make, is definitely a difficult set of questions that need to answer. So, and launching the game itself has so many milestones and gates that you need to cross, right, for it to be at a stage where you have soft launch, and then you have launched. So you need to have live ops embedded in that thinking very, very, very early on. I think this is a realization that is very, very common across game development right now. The industry has evolved quite a bit, like where now games, like, it's given you need to serve players for at least a decade, and therefore like you need to have your live operations framework. There should be a lot of depth in your live operations framework. So very early on, you would want to create systems that allow for that kind of depth, which is why, like, I wouldn't want you to pick a hyper casual game. Those games don't have that kind of depth right now. And while there was a period where you could get a lot of audiences for lesser spend, but now that it's not the case anymore. Right, so you definitely have to spend a lot more to get that kind of audience, and with the LTVs also not scaling up as much, like hyper casual is probably not the right kind of genre to go for. So I would urge you and just to look at maybe some other genre where you can get players which have a little bit more cheaply and with high LTV, right? And to get high LTV, then you need to have a lot of your live operations depth in there. So even during the pre-production phase, you would want to have at least a couple of slides or a good finger on your pulse about how is this game going to monetize over its life cycle. It's not just about launch. It's not just about like if it's like monetization and the initial set of bundles that you will sell and the grind that IAP will solve for. Like it needs to be beyond that, which is what does the event structure look like? How do you plan to run the events? Like will it be run every month? Will it be run every 2 weeks? Like what about season pass? Like would you have a season pass structure in there? Some games have subscriptions, right? So you would need to kind of answer all those questions well in advance. Like now I see most of the games that are launching already have the top first 50, 60, 70 levels established, where you would have at least before you reach level 30, level 40, you would have a co-op framework or a crew framework that comes in, right? So and therefore once you have a bunch of players that come together and you have a crew system, then you need to have a way for crew to come together, right? And they come together when they have like some crew objectives that need to be met, right? So again, that's a, like, in some senses, a live operations framework. So there is a lot more depth that is required at the initial stage of your new game ideation thinking now than what it was probably several years ago.
Yeah, totally understandable. And from what we've seen from researching the games and deconstructing them, we can see that right now, for example, live ops, it is much more diverse and it's introduced much, I think, much earlier in the games, let's say, than before. So usually when you already know the basics of the core gameplay and the meta, and you're into it, and maybe you're starting to feel a little bit bored, that's the moment you can see the first or maybe even a series of events, and the game teaches you to be involved not just in the main game, the core, the meta, the monetization part, but also in the events loop, so that when you are bored with the main part of the game, you can spend time, spend money, and be engaged in the live ops as well. And that is one of the things I think you should be thinking about when launching a new game. So you should be thinking in advance, what is the moment when my player will be bored for the first time and will be ready to just close the game and go somewhere. That is the moment when you have to introduce live ops, when you have to introduce the first event, when you have to just get something, sprinkle some fun inside this system so that it gets going.
Yeah, it's like, it's interesting you mentioned that, because like I remember the time when I was on Country Escape and we were looking at some of these other games in the same kind of genre were doing, and it was like really exciting to see how ambitious Township was during that phase, where like and to your point, it's not only about the moment where your new players would get slightly bored and you would have some events that be turning up for them. Like for Township, they went to a place where they would actually show a lot of mini games and try out a lot of mini games for even their elder audiences, and like for them it was a really good way to not only acquire audiences, say, for maybe cheap, but also like to engage your you know engage players in a different mechanic, in a different way, right? Which would keep the game fresh, and they would just experiment like a hell lot of different mini games and sort like so. So obviously, it was very inspiring to see how ambitious they were. And yeah, and then, like like it's interesting that live operations can mean a lot of, like, it means taking those bets and seeing what works and what doesn't work.
But at the same time, I think there are ways to, to increase the chances of your success. And part of this is the market research and the competitor research. So especially when working in a game that is already established, launched, and you have direct competitors or indirect competitors, but you have niches nearby that might inspire you. I think you should totally check what is going on. So, who is running the live ops? What are the events? What is included? What are the mini games that you might want to use, or the monetization tactics? I think that, like, back in the day, Battle Pass wasn't a thing. Now you can see in almost every game out there it is. Or Piggy Bank. I think it was introduced like a year and a half ago or 2 years. Now it's a standard for the
Yeah.
industry, especially for the casual games. So there are things that you should really look after when analyzing the market and that can help you operating the game, not just updating it, but also running the events, running the event calendar, running the updates. So are there any, I don't know, advice there? So how did you usually approach the competitor analysis when talking about live ops and events? How did you work with it?
I think I've seen, like, during my period at Farm 2 Web, like I was inspired by the team that I was working with, and I could sense that this team was really special because, like, I think we all played the game really, really well. Like, played Farmville 2, the game really, really well. Like, we all understood the game really, really well. But that knowledge existed beyond Farmville 2 as well. Like, and this was a phase when Heyday was there, and obviously Township was there, and they were doing a lot of interesting thing with their events, and they were like, we would always like understand our game and understand what they're doing with their game, and see where the differences were, and figure out why they needed to construct certain mechanics in different ways for their audience, and why we needed to do different things in our game, right? And I think what I'm trying to get to is like that deconstruct, like just figuring out what competition is up to. Like, it needs to come from within, where like you need to, as a game developer, you need to like know your game in and out, but also you need to continuously play your competitor games and understand what's working and what's not working for them. It's important to be abreast about what's happening in the market, right? And like, no one else is going to do that job for you. Like, I think in large companies you have teams that do competitive deconstructs and share decks, and obviously share a lot of learnings along with that, but then you will not be able to generate enough insights from those presentations if you don't play those games as well, right? So it's important. So I think what we try to do in Zynga, in some of the teams that I was with, was like we would actually have in some cases, sessions where people would do deconstructs for competitor titles, right? And that became part of our culture. Like, it would be like, in some ways, a show and tell of sorts, where like people would come and not only pitch about new and interesting things that they would want to introduce in our games, but also have sessions around, what, this is a new thing that one of our competitors trying. I really like it, or I don't like it, and that becomes a conversation, and that becomes part of your that becomes embedded in part of your team culture in some ways, right? So it keeps the conversation thread. It keeps you on your toes about what's happening and what's not happening. So that really helps. And obviously in Zynga you have, like I mentioned, data. So you have data that indicates what mechanics are working, what mechanics are not. And we had a lot of teams that did share information on what interesting things other studios are trying, right? So having that kind of backing in a big company like Zynga is always helpful.
Totally. I think the fact that you can use a big portfolio of games and all the data gathered for years and use it not just for the new games to be launched, but also for understanding how to operate in already existing games. And you've got peer games out there who say, yes, so this works and this doesn't. It doesn't really mean that it will work or won't work for you, but at least it's the initial step, the initial idea that will help you going. It's much better than having no thought at all and just, going blindly out there. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons we've made our tool as well, because we totally understand that's usually even in big companies, from what I've heard and from what I've seen, you've got a dedicated specialist or a team of specialists, and they've all got these big Google spreadsheets with all the information about the competitors, the running the events, with lots of spreadsheets there. So having these gathered in one place is much more comfortable, at least to see. I think that's a really good moment to get to our last part. So usually here in Games and Names, we've got a small tradition.
Okay.
We tend to talk with each and every guest of our podcast about games that they want to recommend. So either this can be a game that they played recently and were really impressed, or the game that they played recently and they didn't love it at all, and they want to share it the world to know that this game is really bad. Well, sometimes it happens. In some cases, we might want to connect the game we're talking about to the topic of the talk itself. So in our case, for example, we can talk about the LiveOps or games that we really believe are running LiveOps like perfect. And I'm sure you can, from your experience, recommend Zynga, and you've already said it, that is one of the top performing companies, one of the top shelf companies that run LiveOps really well. But from the player experience, how do you think, what are the games that come to your mind that you can recommend that you love because of the LiveOps, or vice versa, that you hate it because of the LiveOps?
Okay, I'll not speak as much about the games that I didn't like. It's not because of LiveOps, but I don't think we need to get it over there. Like, I'll definitely pick a game from Zynga stables that I feel is in some senses like gold class for live operations, like Harry Potter puzzles and spells game is fascinating. Like, I recently started playing the game again, and the experience for me was like so smooth, and I could immediately relate to where I left off. I was part of the crew that when I left was active, when I joined, like when I joined, I'm part of a different set of individuals, but again, like I'm embedded in that group in a really nice way. I see that I had a streak that got activated, so that entire experience was really smooth for me. And I think it just goes on to say that the team at Zynga are doing the job really, really well, and the game is really fun to play as well. So Harry Potter does it really well. I'll give a shout out to one of the studios in India who have launched Ludostar. I think they are really innovative with their mechanics as well, and they are running a lot of interesting tests and experiments from what I understand. Talking to the team, and it's really fun to see a game from India that's doing really, really well widely. So Ludostar is definitely a big shout out I would want to share. I am a big fan of Golf Clash. Like, I've played the game, I've stopped the game, I've played the game, I've stopped the game so many times. I feel it's like a love-hate relationship at this point of time. But yeah, like I think that game is easy to pick up, and like if you understand the mini game part of it really, really well, it's really enjoyable. The hard part is obviously like you lose, and then you feel that you've wasted good 3 minutes 4 minutes of your life losing, and then it's not going to get anywhere, that you're not meant to play golf, but then you still feel like, oh, let me give it one more shot. So, and I think their entire the structure for live ops is also set up in an interesting way. I think their season pass is very, very like smooth. Like, I have converted on Golf Clash more than once. So
Nice.
so those are 3 games that come to my mind.
Perfect. Really good choice. So from the top of my mind, I'd say that I have the same love-hate relationship with Wild Rift. So I have deleted it. I then launched it. I played it for a week like crazy. Then I deleted it once again. And I really appreciate that each time I set up it once again and try to play, it changes a lot. So apparently there are players out there who spend hours and hours daily to play it, and it should be fresh for them. But at the same time, it's easy for me to pick up, even though I haven't played it for the last half a year or even for the last year. And I think it's really difficult to maintain this balance. So to bring new changes, bring new content, new heroes, new balance changes, but at the same time be pretty open to all the players that drop the game at some point and then continue it. And it's one of the most, I think, difficult things for running a good live ops. Serving both the players that are new to the game, the players that are hardcore and really into the game and continue playing, and players that are like waves, going there, going out, and then returning. So Wild Reef is one of the examples of games that I really think they do it really well. Another one is Fortnite. So I think it's a really great example of a cross-platform game who runs live ops brilliantly. And they not just run live ops, they make a big show out of it. They always have new updates with a big thing going inside the game with new topics. And right now, I think with the new update, it tries to become a metaverse of some kind, to include lots of other games of different genres inside the game. So it's the next level of live ops, the next level of how you can approach the games in general, and I really love it because both from the player's perspective and from the developer's perspective, it's just really fascinating.
Yeah, Fortnite is definitely going boldly going where no other team has gone before. I think.
Yeah.
It's exciting to see what
Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the third one, and I think this will be an example of a live ops running not really well. So back in the days when I was a student, we spent hundreds of hours playing StarCraft 2. First Winds of Liberty, then Heart of the Swarm, then afterwards Void of the Legacy. And it was fascinating, really good times. And recently I was visiting my mates in London. And we decided, to fill it Friday evening, some pizza, boys, all the PCs and the notebooks gathered around one big table and playing together. And you know what? Of course, we downloaded the client, we launched it, and each time we tried to play as a party, either launching a custom game or trying to find a game, usually trying to launch a custom game. I think 9 out of 10 times it crashed. So basically there was some kind of error. We had to, leave the party, join the party once again, go out of the game, return to the game.
Yeah.
And there was no whatever reason for that. And I remember it clearly. So back in the day, it was working perfectly. So I think the main reason is because the game is not so fresh and it's not maintained as it should be. And that's one of the... So for us, of course, we're not the main user base right now. We decided to return to the game after 5 years, 6 years, 10 years even. Definitely not. But if you continue to maintain the game, this is the bare minimum of what you should be aiming for, at least. That's what I think.
Absolutely. And I think you touched upon, we didn't get into it in depth for this conversation, but for live operations, you need to have a really good pulse of the technical debt that you're incurring. And it's a debt, right? You need to pay it back at some point. And that's one of the architects in our team always to keep saying. So this prioritizing and figuring out how you want to handle that is one of the key decision points. So it looks like it wasn't made in the example that you gave.
Yeah, seems so. Absolutely. So one of the really important parts of live ops is thinking about it from the technical side of the question, not just about engaging the players and having them returning to the game and playing it, but also, will this game be running in 5 years, in 10 years? Is the architecture good enough? Are the servers good enough in order to be maintained? Yeah, in some points, and we know about these games, they are not... there is a decision that they will not be maintained and the servers are closed, and it's totally understandable. But at the same time, if you decide to run game in a long term, be sure that your technical part of the question is good enough to run. Not just the custom maps made by the players, not just the different modes made by the players or by the developers. They're brilliant, no questions there. But the technical side, it was kind of embarrassing. Not what I've expected, honestly. We had a good laugh about it, but I think 5 or 10 years ago, if I've stumbled upon it, I would just delete the game and never return to it. So you should be aware of these kind of situations, and you should be prepared for them as well. Good one. All right. Then I think it's a good moment to call it a day. Vikas, thank you so much for joining us. It was a really fruitful conversation. We've tackled a lot of interesting topics. And I really hope that for our listeners and viewers out there is a much better understanding right now how to work with LiveOps, what are the pitfalls and challenges, what are the things or main insights that can be taken from this episode and integrated in their work right here and right now. And we've also shared a bunch of stories, and I think it's always great to, when you're listening to a podcast and you can hear someone sharing their experience, be it good or bad. So thank you very much. It was really great to have you today.
Hey Stan, it was my pleasure and good, like to get on a video call after what seems like ages. So I
Yeah,
treasure
that
this.
is true.
I treasure this as well, and this is one of my first podcasts. So I'd be happy to get any feedback from your listeners as well.
All right. Yeah. So everybody out there, if you've got some feedback, especially positive, please, join us in the comments, join us, ping us, leave us a comment so that we know that everything is good and we're doing the right job. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you to all of us, to all of you, sorry about it, to all of you who not just joined, but listened to this moment. You are the best, remember it. And have a good time. See you next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye.